have a formal thing, or do we have a clinically pressed thing, or are we just going into it?
Well, I feel like we can just talk about that. This is episode 2 of Barbells and Bourbon, or in this case, beer bottles
Yeah, beer
and
bottles,
barbells.
alcohol,
Barbells and beer bottles.
alcohol, and assholes.
Funny side story I can tell you later. We were about to call this weightlifting and wine, as I earned a bottle of wine for a project I did, and I won't share it with Kelly, but that's okay. But I figured we could go with our tradition all, and by that I mean we've done it once, so we might as well do it again. Review of what we are drinking for the evening, and then jump into our topic.
Sure. I feel like maybe I should. Is that the formal start? Because
let's make that the formal start.
Because I feel like I'm drinking a Wisconsin beer, for actually a La Crosse beer, Rump Shaker, 11 stars out of 10. But because I'm clearly biased, I've never had this one. This is one Doc gave me.
Oh, fresh squeeze. Good summer version. A little less of a bite to it, but very good.
So get the old bottle opener out.
There you go. Nothing but health and wellness on this one.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm the picture of health. So this is from Bend, Oregon. I don't know how you say that brewery. Deschutes.
That's how I always say it.
It's 60 IBUs. It's an IPA, obviously, and 6.4% alcohol. They describe it as a juicy citrus and grapefruit flavor profile, as if fresh citra and mosaic hops were squeezed straight into the bottle.
Well, there you go.
Pretty good looking bottle. Ooh.
Yeah, I like that one in the summer a lot. It's a good one.
I don't know how that's 60 IBUs.
It doesn't seem to bite as hard as a lot of IPAs.
No, that's really good. What was our rating scale?
I think out of 5 glasses.
5 glasses. Out of 5 bottles.
5 bottles in this case.
So, context, it was like 85, 90 degrees today here in Texas. So, this is quite refreshing. I'm going to give it... I feel like there's so much stress. I'm going to give it a flat 4.
Okay.
If it had, and that's in the context of lighter IPAs.
For sure.
Yeah. Double fist it. What are you drinking?
So to pick it up, just because it was relatively cheap and I was hoping we'd get one of these in this week, I have George Dickel Tennessee whiskey. Only a $20 bottle, but I would say for a $20 bottle, it's not bad. This is a number 12, so I'm assuming it doesn't actually say how long it was in there. It just says it's number 12. It is a 90 proof. Apparently George Dickel's been around since 1870. It just kind of sounds like George Dickel would be kind of a badass. But yeah, I hate ranking these because I honestly enjoy all of them, so it's really hard to say which ones I'm big on. But for $20, I can give it like a 3.8. Like I'd drink it fairly significantly, fairly often if I needed to, but without breaking the bank.
I think it's funny you say he sounds like a badass, because to me I picture like an old-timey accountant literally just like sliding coins across it. Yeah, there you go.
That's the guy right there.
Yep, I'm pretty sure that was like one of my uncles or something.
Yep, he was known to make the best whiskey back in 1870.
Side note, how many people can make the best whiskey?
It depends on who you ask, I think.
Also, how can all of these companies be around for 140, 50 years? Like every bottle that you take the time to read is like, been around since 1832.
Right.
Maybe.
Well, you know, if he only produced one bottle back in 1870, technically that counts.
Yeah, I guess. Those damn technicalities.
Hey, do what you got to do.
So, was it included in the intro? We talked for a little bit before. Was it included in the intro what we're talking about?
Oh, we can kind of reintroduce it.
So, I come from a very, I feel like it's a pretty common background in context of what I study. But as far as context of, I don't know, I always feel like lifters who turn scientists or generally have interesting stories. I personally don't think mine's that interesting.
Okay.
But I always like listening to like other scientists who started off just in the weight room. And then there are these people who just start off as scientists and stay scientists. And I think there's value to both. But there's also that sect of people in this industry who never really get a formal education in biology or kinesiology, exercise science, and get a bunch of certifications and still practice and preach about different exercise modality, recovery modality, etc. And kind of the overarching theme of this episode is going to be the value and the differences kind of all those different approaches. So people who start as a scientist, stay as a scientist, and just do science. People who start as a lifter, go into science, do science, and practice a little bit. And then those who just kind of don't do any formal background and jump into certifications, etc. We all know Joe Blow down the street who has 45 letters after his name, who has no degree to speak of in an exercise related field. And we know people who are like just Dr. X, PhD, and yet they're the first person you turn to as far as practicing and scientific principle.
Right.
So, pretty accurate description of what you want to talk about?
Yeah, I think that kind of covers it. And we can potentially expand beyond that, not just with the lifter, just, with athletic training, kind of sports medicine, where some of that stuff comes in, but doesn't always mean everything. Mm-hmm. Especially with just general coaches. I've got one particular example in my head that if we get there, we can get there. But yeah, I think that covers the basis of it.
So I think one important kind of notation to make immediately is this is a somewhat unique problem or opportunity, depending on if you're a pessimist or an optimist, within our field, is that this is a reality. People can come into this and affect people's lives, good or bad, because it is relatively unregulated as far as who is an expert or who has the power to say different things and make recommendations, which is why truly why the fitness industry is beautiful and why it is ugly.
Oh, for sure.
And why even just fitness as a whole. So in my mind, I'm trying to fitness industry doesn't really describe it well in my mind, but I don't have another way to describe it. That includes like
it's almost too big.
The research around exercise science and recovery and all these different modalities. And then also nutrition is obviously kind of the gold child of industries we would put in front of that problem. So that is really, if we were going to start off by talking about why I think this kind of disparate existence of people in the industry exists, I would be putting my money on that.
Yeah, I agree. I think the hard part for me is that it seems like it's such a time and place discussion in terms of like when they're important and when they're maybe not. But even that oversimplifies it, because then the other one, and I've heard this on a couple different things, is like there is a huge difference between experience and expertise. Mm-hmm. And just one kind of coming to my mind, like I referenced the CSCS already. I know multiple people that either had it and just let it lapse because they didn't need it for their position, but would just crush anybody in terms of like practical knowledge or academic knowledge. And then there's the ones, which is unfortunately we're seeing this more in Division I football, that they have their CSCS because it's now required, but that doesn't mean they have any clue what's going on. And these workouts and the general demeanor of how these things are going, and we're putting people at risk because they don't know any better. It's just they've got experience in it. That doesn't mean they know what the hell they're doing, and
Yeah.
it's scary.
Well, I think that's an interesting thing is like relative to a lot of fields, you could say being a coach is easy. And before people start freaking out and turning this off, I mean that in the way that really anyone can do it. It's kind of like being a professional boxer, if I'm not mistaken. If you want to be a professional boxer, you pretty much declare yourself a professional boxer, and you can find something somewhere where somebody's going to punch your face in, and you can call yourself a pro boxer.
There you go.
Whereas other fields, like a parallel mechanic, if you want to be a mechanic, you can call yourself a mechanic, but the first time you don't fix a car, you're out. And being a coach, there are a lot of things that are going to do some benefit. So if you have somebody do something when they're doing nothing, they're going to get better.
Right.
Somebody who's getting better, keep doing something, they're going to keep getting better. What separates the coaches is truly, in my opinion, being able to separate that ideology of chasing getting better with, I just had this conversation tonight, that's really weird. We get stuck in this mindset of better, but there's a time and a place for everything. So my example tonight was there are times I prescribe movements that I know my athletes are going to be really, really bad at. And it's not for some deeper thinking, well, how does knowing how to do this movement make the system better at interacting with different environmental and task constraints, etc. It's more, I want to give them something that's going to motivate them to try really, really hard. And most athletes, in absence of skill in something, pursue skill in something very hard, but they won't be able to use enough weight that they're going to kill themselves. So if I take a really good squatter and he's never done split squats and I make him do split squats, he might get really sore, but that's not fatiguing the system in the same way that doing heavy back squat is. And it takes his mind away from wanting to do heavy back squats so much because he's got a new challenge ahead of himself. So I think I'm not a great coach. I would love to be a great coach. I've done some cool things coaching, but I'm nowhere near a great coach. But I think what great coaches do really well, way better than I could ever imagine, is being able to separate the idea of progress indefinitely with progress long term. And that sounds synonymous, but what I mean is that progress indefinitely, that coach is chasing consistent progression. And what I mean by progress long term is they're okay with stepping back now or shifting focus to something that may be not as obviously beneficial to the athlete, but in their weird, twisted mind, they have this greater plan that it ends up being like that, just amazing.
I feel like it's somewhat what you're getting to is it's the kind of the conversation of training versus working out. Like even you can have training when you're constantly trying to progress just one single thing, sure. But if all your progression is straight linear, where it's just like, well, each week we're going to add either a little bit of weight or another rep or two, is that truly a training? Like, have you gone and understood that?
Yeah, you're just going to crash and burn. But
And I think that's where the expertise side of it comes in, because I could have 10 years of experience as a personal trainer, but if all I've done is the same program every single time with a different client, and we get results at the beginning and then it kind of plateaus off, which is not uncommon, and then maybe we change a thing or two, am I really an expert at what I'm doing, or do I just happen to have enough experience and with a population that I'm going to get results with? And no matter what I have behind, or because I've taken 17 different certifications, so I just throw a bunch of exercises in there, like, is it truly good? Does that mean anything?
Yeah. I think that's fair. I think kind of we're both beating around the bush as far as, so with certifications, I guess it plays into both of our thoughts. So with certifications, they can range from a straight like 15-minute test online,
right?
Letters after your name, to being a legitimate like week-long or a longer class time with some practicum kind of experience. And if you think, I think an important distinction is certification versus like a licensure program. So like in my mind, like an RD is not a certification; it's a license.
No. Right.
Because RDs and CSSDs, that's ridiculous as far as the time and effort commitment needed to partake in such endeavors. So we're talking about straight certifications, which is much more prominent in this field. There are certifications that are decent, and some will teach you basic principles of program design.
Yep.
And that's where a lot of people base, not a lot, I would hope not a lot. That's the danger of giving somebody now some elevated position, theoretically, within this schema of coaches and practitioners by saying you're a certified strength coach in this or a certified personal trainer, is they think then that they are essentially good to go.
Mm-hmm.
If you have basic and beyond that basic scope, which I would argue lasts all of 6 months to a year for a single person, you're not doing anyone any favors by not furthering your education.
Right.
This is inherently where I intended to go with this discussion. And I said this, if anyone wants to look back at the first clinically pressed episode that I was on. I don't remember the episode number. 2. Nice. That was the first
interview. Yeah.
Is they asked what's some advice you would give to somebody. What was the question? I think it was one of the clinically pressed questions, wasn't it?
What is the advice you'd give yourself if you could go back a few years? Or potentially if you would give somebody advice that was trying to pursue what you're doing?
Yeah, maybe that was it. And I said, like, continuing education. Because all of these certifications, they have the potential to be great springboards into something much bigger. But if you use that certification as the end goal, you're putting yourself at a major intellectual and practical disadvantage compared to somebody who wants it more. So a CSCS is a good example because it's a hugely popular certification.
Right, which I struggle with, but also understand.
Yeah. People who aren't even, like, I'm going to pursue a CSCS, and we'll get to why later, but I'm a scientist. I don't really particularly need a CSCS. But if that's your end goal, if you get a CSCS, yes, a CSCS requires a 4-year degree. That's great. You now have a degree, you have a certification, and what some people consider like an elevated certification. But if that's it, what have you learned? The
You
NSCA,
read the book.
the NSCA is an organization. Oh, the cat.
Oh yeah, the cat. But then,
Oh yeah, there you go. The NSCA it's a good organization. They put out good. I just very recently submitted a paper to Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research. They put out some good work. They put out some bad work, as with any journal, as with any organization. They do good things and bad things. So if you limit yourself to that specific scope of one exam, what are you coming away with? You're not set up to be a Division I strength coach. You're not set up to be an Olympic strength coach. In fact, I read some of the prep materials right before I left University of Illinois, and some of the things are just vehemently wrong, like have been disproven.
right.
And it takes time to update some of those principles, or people within the organization disagree. But the vast consensus is that they're wrong. I guess I'm beating a dead horse by just repeatedly bringing up different avenues by which you're limiting yourself. But I think it's really the take-home point, because people coming in, I don't know how many times I've talked to undergraduates who are like, what certifications do you have? What certifications should I get? What certifications are good? What are bad? And the answer is, I don't know. Nobody knows.
Right.
They're all bad. It's all contextualized.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the biggest point, and one that we've dealt with a lot just at UWL with our SPC side is we have all these undergrads, some of which are like, I want to be a college strength coach. And it's like, okay, have you done anything in the SPC? Well, no. How in the world do you think you're going to be a college strength coach then? Like, you've never seen it. Personal training at the student rec does not count. Nobody cares. Now, to be a college strength coach, whether it's right, wrong, or otherwise, you're going to have your CSCS. Almost guaranteed. I had it, used it as a thing to help set me apart on my resume, which I'll talk about here in a second. Let it lapse. Now going back overseeing the SPC, probably feel like I should have it again for that reason, if not only just to have it look good on paper.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Not because I'm going to glean some amazing information out of it, but for that reason. And so where I've kind of come back around to it, and I'll talk about this kind of from the athletic training and SPC strength coach hat, is like, when you're young, you have to kind of play the game. What makes your resume different than somebody else who's a undergrad student who's got some experience, and what sets you apart? If you can take your CSCS and pass it and not get your certification yet because you didn't graduate, but say on your resume and in your cover letter that you're already done, you all of a sudden look completely different than the person that hasn't taken it yet and may not pass it. Is that right? I don't think so. Is it wrong? I don't know that it is, because it is showing a baseline of understanding, and that's where it's at. And so when I've talked to them with that is, if I were to say any of them for certifications, is get your CSCS, get your USAW. It'll give you at least an introduction to the Olympic movements. Those are your big two. If you can get into a nutrition class that preps you up for the CISSN, now you're starting to just branch out a little bit. From there, it's so up to you to actually apply it. Dr. Wright does not have a CSCS anymore. Would I ever question the guy on his knowledge of programming and energetics and how to set up? Not a freaking chance. Because he doesn't need a piece of paper to show that he's legit, because this is what he's done for the past 25 years in terms of his research and his practical experience. And anybody that would question that because he doesn't have a piece of paper is just dumb, for lack of a better description.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think that's where it's important, maybe early on in your career, to be somewhat of a quote unquote like certification gypsy or seminar gypsy because you need to do something to set you apart. When you're 20 years in the game and you've intentionally gotten good at what you do, I think that should count for something.
Right? Yeah. I think, what was I going to say? I had something good to say. Oh, bitch. Oh, there it is. So I think the opposite of what you just said. I would never question Dr. Wright on his path, his knowledge, because he's done it. He's created knowledge in that area. So he doesn't need a piece of paper to show you that he's an expert or that he's qualified to speak on what he's speaking on or to do what he's doing. I think the parallel to that is that if you see somebody, and there are situations, I heard one explanation because I brought this up. If you see somebody who the only thing they can do is cling to those letters, turn and run.
Right.
Yes, okay, some people are very proud that they earned a PhD. We get it. I'm pursuing one. I can attest to that right now. It seems impossible, and I'm sure there are plenty of PhDs out there who walk through it. There are plenty of PhDs who work plenty harder than I am. But when I get out, I can't say for sure. I guess right now my mind state is I wouldn't want my letters to speak for me.
Which I think is a super interesting point because you're bringing both sides of the coin, which I think is extremely important on that side. So somebody who goes in their specific program, and I'm just going to use athletic training as an example because it's easy for me, is like you go from your undergrad athletic training. One, you got some clinical experience, but it was when you were a sophomore, junior, and senior in college. Basically, you don't know shit. Looking back, I didn't know anything. Maybe you then go into a master's program. But if you don't go the route of the graduate assistant in athletics and don't get any clinical experience and go maybe potentially more of your route, which is not wrong, it's just a different route, and you're in the lab all the time, you get your master's degree. Great. Then you go on to get your PhD. It could be whatever you want it to be, exercise phys, biomechanics, so on and so forth. How are you then going to go and preach about how to take care of someone in a clinical setting when you have no clinical experience except for your 2 to 3 years in undergrad when you really didn't understand what was going on in the first place?
So I think
that's the hard part. And I think that's where, like, when you talk about it, like not being defined as your letters, if you're applying your knowledge to making people more powerful and stronger and better athletes, you've got, even in your short career, how many hours of coaching where it's been, the word is escaping me, intentional in terms of like, how are things going? Did this work? Did this not? Is this good? Is that bad? Not just, here's your program. This is the one I give everybody. If you don't fit it, that's on you. That's your fault.
I think, so I go back and forth on that very point because that argument has been used plenty of times to just automatically downplay anything that I've said. I've had plenty of people do that. And if you're going based on that argument, experience is where it's at. So if somebody has more experience than you, and good experience, if you disagree, you're wrong. And that's obviously like a dichotomous example. And generally it's going to fall more in a gray area. But I think this is where I go back and forth. Because I agree, experience is irreplaceable. And I think scientific principle, or
putting them together though, is where I think it's where that's where shit gets like, that's where the magic happens.
Yeah, I agree 100%. But I think I'm trying to figure out how to put it into words. I guess it comes down to ideas, in my opinion, should be judged on their merit. So I think you need to be, not you, the kind of general you, need
Yep.
to be kind of a conscious consumer of what you're taking in. So that means, regardless of if it's Joe Blow down the street who's 400 pounds, not 400 anymore, but just a fat looking dude who comes into the gym and starts talking about lifting, and you guys are talking and you disagree, you can't write him off because he's 400 pounds. Just like you can't automatically accept a 280-pound guy walking around at 15% body fat that his opinion is better. So I think as a consumer of science or of popular media or of opinions, you need to be conscious in where that information is coming from and how they're justifying that stance. So the best question, and it's a good litmus test for somebody as well, if their opinions are worthwhile, is why.
Mm-hmm.
When you ask somebody why, A, you get an opinion, or you get the explanation of how they arrived at that conclusion. And if that's not good, then why would you want to listen to them?
Yeah, there was a business guy that had the 3 why test. If you could say this is why you're doing something, and when you could sit there and give an explanation and somebody could say why again, and you could answer it up to 3 times, then you keep it. Then you know it's legit.
I agree.
And I think that's a great one, just to not dive too far on the nutrition side of it, but like all these nutritional wellness coaches that happen to be slanging shakes and supplements all over the place. Like, can you truly explain to me what the underlying cause is and why I need this versus just eating food, other than what the brochure told you to say?
Yeah. I think I also, the second reason I think that question is so powerful is because their reaction is so telling of their intention.
Mm-hmm.
So most people who are truly passionate about lifting or nutrition or athletic training or sports med, when you ask why, A, they're going to have a stellar explanation.
Yeah, they're not going to be able to shut up about it.
And if they don't, which is fair, I mean, scientists postulate all the time about what they may think. They're generally ethical enough or self-aware enough to tell you that that's what they're doing. They're postulating.
Yeah, it's like powerful to hear from somebody for them to say, I'm not sure. Here's my thoughts, but I'm going to need to look into it more.
But when you ask somebody who is just that Herbalife spewing clown, any of them, spewing clown, when you ask them why, all they're going to do is get offended and belittle you and get mad.
So I had one of those. We posted a funny meme. It was like somebody, what was it? Something about spending like, did 4 weeks of Avocare and lost $200 or something like that, and didn't lose anything. And so somebody who is as a Herbalife person was like, well, obviously they didn't take their products correctly, because when I did it, I lost 35 pounds. And so in a somewhat trolling back manner, but still being very nice about it, said, well, that's great. Congratulations. What else did you do in order to maintain that, or, to accomplish that? Crickets. Because you can't tell me it was just because you took your supplements and your protein shakes. There's no way. Yeah, it's in 2 months, Juan lost $200 on it.
I think
on Herbalife, Juan lost $200.
Yeah.
And before and the after is the exact same.
Yeah, I think being I think we've dove down that road pretty hard, but I personally don't have anything to say about what certifications are good or bad. No, there are good, there are bad.
Right.
Generally, here's the best test I have to recommend. Find somebody who's doing what you want to do and ask them what they think is good. Because they're the person who's going to be the type of person who's hiring you. And if they think something is good, even if you disagree, like I disagree, certifications in general, I think there are better avenues in which to prove that you're qualified.
Agreed.
But certifications in general, like people flock to certain ones, whether they're good or bad. And that if you have one that's considered popular or good, you're just more marketable. You're not any better, you're more marketable.
And to tie into what you had mentioned earlier, because I'd love to hear it of why you're going to get your CSCS, like, again, I don't know that it's right, but at some point in your career, you're going to kind of have to play the game of it all. And so for like young strength coaches, you are going to almost have to get your CSCS. And at least, I know we referenced that it might be a little bit out of date, but it's hard to change a textbook. There are thousands of references in this book to studies and people that are very, very smart. So at least there was some effort in putting that together, and it's not just one guy's opinion on strength and conditioning, which I think gives it some credence versus like if I just started up Joel's strength and conditioning certification and said, well, this is what I found to be useful, and here's my reference. This guy,
yeah,
it's not going to hold the same water in that book. And so I'm actually really curious and I kind of told you my reason for getting it again is, A, it's a good refresher for me. Sure, it gives me a good baseline of knowledge. Am I going to actually use anything in the book? No, because most of our students that I tell to take it is you have to read the book because you're testing out of the book, not out of what you learned.
Yeah.
Because what you're learning is potentially advanced past the book, or we're under a different system and a program and an idea that the book is just, that's not their thing. They're trying to keep it as basic as possible. So while I'm not taking it for a greater use of knowledge, it's a good review. It gives me a baseline to talk to undergraduates as they're trying to figure it out. Just had a meeting with a guy today trying to get him away from the bro science of just the stuff that he's read. He just doesn't know any better. Yeah. Trying to get him to evolve in that. But at the same time, telling him, you have to take this test. You have to learn these basics. Great place to start. Get through it. Bank what you think is useful. Then get ready to start learning the stuff that's really useful. So segueing to why the CSCS for you?
I mean, you already said it. Like, you have to play the game. People, even in the more science type field, at least in the science that's related to performance, people want to see CSCS. They want to see some sort of evidence that you have experience in a practical realm there, that you at least understand it.
Right.
And I think you brought it up earlier, and it's people can say that about every field, as far as research versus practicing, especially in kind of applied performance research. People want to know that you understand what's going on in a weight room or on the track or on a field or on a court, because otherwise they just don't give merit. Because there truly are. Nick Bird brought this up really well. He was we were talking about what I wanted to do. And when I came into the ESS program at UWL, I wanted to be a strength coach. When I came into the kinesiology program at Madison, I thought I was going to be an athletic trainer. Well, clearly I'm not doing either of those now. And I still went to grad school thinking that I wanted to do very applied type research. Now that I kind of had an experience doing other things, and I've had an opportunity to read and kind of develop my knowledge of physiology and kind of see what floats the boat, what doesn't. I think I'm more interested in physiology than I am die-hard applied research. But there's still a spot in my heart and my interest for applied, because that's where I come from. I love seeing freaky dudes and gals do freaky things.
Mm-hmm.
So what I kind of described when Nick and I were talking about it was that I want to be an applied researcher with a very strong background in physiology, or a basic, like a physiology researcher with a background in applied research. Because I think what there are plenty of is applied researchers, and there are plenty of physiology researchers. And physiology researchers are really great at physiology, but in general, not so great at application.
Right.
Applied researchers are really good at applying things, but not so good at physiology all the time. So I think if you can split that difference and kind of get at least good input from both sides, you have the opportunity to affect more people, because you can take things that strength and conditioning coaches are already knowing, which is a perfect example is we see that power, like power output, the ability to create force over time, force times velocity, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the best determinants of functional capacity in an older population, meaning that if you can maintain power, which generally means maintaining strength, you can be more self-sufficient as long as you experience biological aging. Well, shit, that sounds like something we know. That sounds like something that we do in our lab here, but we just do it with athletes.
Right.
The only thing you have to be willing to do is take that principle and form it into a more applicable modality for somebody who is smaller and more frail and doesn't have as much muscle. But if you can do that, and then you can take the physiological principles that you understand and actually do some kind of in-depth analyses, you can hopefully, and this is a stretch, but you can hopefully elucidate some of those mechanisms, which might give you insight into a way to better prevent the biological aging process. And I just think there's such a beautiful area in between very hardcore molecular biology and very hardcore sport performance research that could impact not only athletes, but also the general population, and kind of give us hopefully a better understanding of muscle and the nervous system and how those two interact. I don't know. All that to being said, I'm getting my CSCS. No, but it truly is like you just have to play the game. People want to see letters.
And that's where, again, time and place.
Yeah.
If you were going to be a hardcore powerlifting coach for the rest of your career, do you need the CSCS? Probably not.
If I were deciding to not split that difference and go into molecular biology somewhere, like a true molecular biology, I probably don't need it as well.
Right. Because they don't care.
Yeah.
And ATs, like they have their CSCS, but I trust some of the ATs I know that have their CSCS to write a strength program.
Yeah.
Because it's not their thing. It's just that, and then at that point, it's letters behind their name. Not wrong. I'm glad they did it. But before they were to ever jump into something with it, I would hope for more extra learning and deep learning about it to make sure that it wasn't just because, well, I'm certified, therefore I can do it.
Yeah. I think this might be a good spot to go into the other side, which is we've been talking about all the downfalls of relying on certifications for your kind of prowess within a field. There's equally as many downfalls to relying on a bachelor's, a master's, or a PhD in the same field. And we kind of alluded to that point earlier when you're talking about people who only point to their letters to kind of force you to trust them or to believe in them or give worth to their words. Coming out of my undergrad, and this is true for almost anyone except apparently Greg Nuckols, who came out of his undergrad and just blew the frickin' world away.
Bell curve.
Yeah, yeah. He's over here.
Yeah.
Well outside of that +3 standard deviation range. But there are plenty of people who come out and go like, oh shit, I know stuff now. You don't. You have a great basic understanding of a lot of small things that go on in the body. If you take a biology class, and this blows me away. Every time I take another kind of biology class, you're like, well, okay, we're getting pretty in depth now.
Right.
And then you just learn that like there's more and more and more, and it's just like this deep web. And then just think about it logically. Like if you think you understand some process, realize that there's somebody who's been doing research in that specific process, or even one small aspect of that process for 20 or 30 years, and they still have more research to do.
I learned that with my AT certification. I came out, finished my undergrad, passed. I'm certified athletic trainer. Got to grad school. There are coaches there that have been coaching longer than I've been alive. They've seen some stuff. They've seen the injury that I'm trying to explain to them and then going, yep, know how this is going to go when I don't have the slightest clue.
Yeah.
And if you can humble yourself on that pretty early on, you save yourself a lot of heartache.
Yeah, no shit. So I guess it comes down to, again, a BS, an MS, an MSc, a PhD, an EDD, an MD. Well, I guess MD and DO are a little. There are still shitty docs out there, like true docs.
True, but you got to at least
weeding out
some level of competency.
A little bit more intensive than a PhD or a master's or a bachelor's.
And I'd argue even with that, like your rotations and your residencies and all of those things, like sure you're out there doing it on your own ish, but you still got some guy looking over your shoulder telling you you're a freaking idiot.
Yeah, whether you're not or you are. But those degrees carry the value. I guess this is the argument I made when I was feuding with somebody a while back. I was still in my undergrad, but we disagreed on everything, and the point got brought up that I look the way I do, which is fine. People brought up that point. I'm pretty sure I bitched about this to you when I was at lacrosse still.
Yeah.
But it's fine. People bring up points, whatever they need to do to feel like they win. But my argument was that in the end, the person with the most experience is going to win. So I guess a little bit more background. We were on the same degree path, taking the same exact kind of degree plan, same classes, but the only difference was I did more outside of the classroom. We both lifted pretty well.
Yep.
But I participated in research and kind of talked to other coaches and had conversations that were beneficial. And at the end of the day, I think that is what made my degree good. I don't think there were good classes that I took, But like I said, that's a great introduction to very low level information as far as scientists in whatever field you're studying are concerned.
That everybody's going to get who's along that path.
Yeah. What makes a degree valuable is everything you do outside of the degree. So I like to think of, for undergrad education, especially nowadays with grade inflation and just like, most people who go to undergrad are going to get a degree. So nothing.
Stick it out, yeah.
Nothing inherently about a bachelor's degree, and I mean we're seeing this now. It used to be like, think about way back. If you went to college, you're like an intellectual powerhouse in the world.
Right.
And then it's like, okay, well, more people are going to college. If you had an advanced degree, oh, you're doing well. And now I don't know how many fields I've talked to people. Everybody has an MBA now. Everybody has a master's now. And they're like, athletics training is going to a master's requirement.
Yeah, we're trying to be like PTs.
Yeah. So degrees by themselves carry very little weight.
That was my eye opener when I was first and second year at Kansas. What made me special? What made my resume stand out? I was going to get a master's degree, worked with a team, ran my own show. Oh, great. So did every other Division I graduate assistant in the country.
Yeah.
So CSCS were letters after my name, general basic knowledge, got an ART certification. Boom. At least I'm a little different. Cost me some money.
Yeah.
But is that worth it to get the job that I want?
Yeah. And I think that's the thing. It's like, you're in your undergrad, you want to have fun. And truth be told, I had plenty of, probably too much fun in my undergrad.
Not you.
Yeah, no, I don't do anything bad.
We did start an episode or a thing called Barbells and Bourbon.
Yeah.
So
I mean, there's plenty of opportunity to do. You have more free time than you'll ever have in your undergrad.
Yep.
So where the value of a degree comes is not from the degree. It's from the A, connections that you make, B, the other opportunities that are afforded to you simply because you call yourself an undergraduate student at a university. If you think about it, we can't have, like, if I met somebody at Chipotle tomorrow and they're like, oh, I've always wanted to try science, would you mind if I drop by and just worked on it a little bit? No, you can't.
Yeah.
You're an undergraduate student, so you can come into our lab and help out and A, boost your resume, B, learn a skill.
Right. And
C, we're going to thank you for it. That type of opportunity is rarely afforded to anyone else at any other point in their life. So I think what I was getting at a little bit ago before I kind of lost my thought process, as I do a lot, is like a degree or going to college, I think in my mind is as much paying for the opportunity to do things outside of a degree plan as it is paying for a degree plan.
Couldn't agree more. And I stress that to all the students that I now work with. I have no idea in my undergrad, and I just say it's a healthy combination of both. Was I given the opportunities to do all the extra stuff? Probably. Was it pushed out there as much as I would like it to in hindsight? Maybe not. Did I take advantage of those? No. I wasn't aware of it. That wasn't a thought process in my mind. And do I regret it every minute to this day? Yes. And so that's when I talk to undergrads now. It's like, don't look back in 6 years and be like, I just wasted a bunch of time at undergrad. Could have done so much more.
Even I say that, and I feel as though I did decently well. I was
for sure
by no means near the top of like a country as far as undergrads, not even close. But I feel like I can also say I was not even close to the bottom. And
couldn't agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now it's just a matter of not trying to waste as much time as I possibly can in my life now because I feel like I'm 5 years behind.
I feel like, yeah. I think that's just the nature of people who strive hard to achieve. Is you're always going to feel. I mean, as desperate and pessimistic as this sounds, I think about it a lot. Just as a realist, I think people who have high achievement goals, not goals, that plays it lightly, who feel as though they need to achieve high amount or high quality achievements,
Mm-hmm.
inherently are just live kind of an anxious, desperate, and somewhat sad life at times. And I don't. That's just a maybe my personal guess or my personal hypothesis, but like you see it all the time, right? People who are just anxious and kind of upset about most things all the time. Maybe I just need help. I bet there are very few. There are very few high-level scientists that I know in general, I guess, but there are very few high-level achievers, I guess is the best way to describe it, that I know that aren't anxious and kind of crazy all the time. So I think maybe, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'll do some research on that. I think that would be an interesting.
Potentially, I'll need a thesis idea of some sort of like survey if I decide to pursue this master's degree in sports management. So that might come in really handy.
I have sports management. Can you do like performance type surveys?
I bet you I could do whatever I wanted.
Yeah,
I haven't actually started it, so we'll see.
I have plenty of information for you.
Fair.
We have quite a few survey projects going on. We have daily surveys going right now with that NASCAR team we work with TCU soccer, TCU baseball, and probably starting. Oh shit, that was starting today. I think TCU women's basketball.
Nice.
And Jesuit Dallas. I don't know if I can say that part. I think I can. I think they're doing surveys as well. So we have a pretty good amount of active survey collecting on a daily basis and weekly reporting going on.
Sounds good.
Also, I think you're super set up as far as like help for thesis ideas.
Yeah, I know some people. It's good to know people.
What else didn't we cover? Oh, people who come in. Man, we talked way too much on the first two. I think we should probably stop pretty quick.
No, I think we've kind of hit the basis of it. Of we both kind of generally feel time and a place and playing the game.
I think it could really come down to what I said earlier.
If it serves you.
In general, if you want to think or want to decide whether somebody is good or bad at what they do, figure out if they're good or bad at what they do. Letters, degrees, licensures, yeah, they play a role in setting up somebody for whether they are good or bad.
Right.
But inherently, at the end of the day, those I think are my two most used sayings ever. Inherently, at the end of the day, somebody is either good or they're bad. Not dichotomous. Damn it. But you know what I mean. They're good or they're bad at what they do because they are good or bad at what they do, and you need to educate yourself in a way that you are prepared to make those distinctions. And I don't think certifications or formal education automatically enable you to do so, nor do they automatically enable somebody to be good at what they do.
Well said.
I wouldn't say it's well said, but it was said.
No, I think that sums it up really well.
Do we have any take-home points other than that?
I think, to go after what you said, just if you're the consumer, your why points were really important. Making sure you're asking why and having faith and confidence in how they respond to that. And there shouldn't be a hesitation, or they should want to ramble because they've got a reason and it isn't the bottom line trying to sell you something, especially in the nutrition world and even in the fitness world. And then for the people that potentially need to look at certifications, figure out what makes sense for where you're at. Again, none of them are inherently good or bad or otherwise, except some of them are better or worse. But like you said, you got to play the game. You got to be smart about it. You got to work to get done what you want to get accomplished. And if you don't, that's your call. But you're going to struggle to get some places because that's just how it is. That's the world, and you got to deal with that at some point. And I think that's harder nowadays because everybody wants to just be gifted and given things, and that's not how that thing works.
Yeah.
So just being aware of that, but I think kind of those cover the two sides of it.
I agree. I think that's this is going to be a really rambly podcast until I can figure out how to talk for an hour and a half straight.
That was the whole point of it. I think we talked about some good stuff. I was really curious about your point on it, so we can end the podcast with a cheers, sir.
Cheers. I'll be up. I'll touch the screen there.
There you go. And we'll talk to everybody on the next episode.